Most people don't believe him. They laugh, they scoff, or worse, they pity him. Because in a world like Trigon, where betrayal is common, where death comes easy, and where hope is often a prelude to disappointment, Vash's worldview seems ridiculous, naive, infantilized. But what if it isn't? What if choosing to believe in goodness even when you've seen the worst of humanity isn't foolishness, but a form of resilience? What if Vash's kindness isn't a weakness, but a rebellion? We hear a lot about paranoia, about the fear that everyone is out to get you. But there's a lesser-known, stranger concept, Noia, the belief that the universe is conspiring in your favor. That people, deep down, want to do right by you. That love, not chaos, is the true order of things. And Vash the Stampede might be enemy's most sincere expression of it. But here's the thing, Pronoia isn't natural for someone who's been hurt. It's not a given, it's a choice Vash keeps making, even when it cost him, especially when it cost him. This video isn't about optimism for its own sake. It's not a glorification of passivity or toxic positivity. It's about how hope becomes a radical act when you've known despair. About how the belief in human goodness can emerge not from ignorance, but from grief, and maybe how believing in others can be the one way we learn to believe in ourselves. So let's start there. Not with his smile, not with his catchphrase, but with the blood on his hands. When we first meet Vash, we see a fool, a buffoon with spiky hair, red coat flapping in the wind, caught in chaos he seems too incompetent to control. But that's the point. It's a mask. The Vash we see isn't the whole picture, it's a defense mechanism. Behind the theatrics, there's a quiet man with a haunted past. One who's witnessed extinction. One who's lost a family he couldn't save. One who carries the weight of a genocidal twin brother, tease, and still chooses mercy. 'Cause underneath the silliness, Vash lives by a single rule. Thou shalt not kill, even if it breaks him. And it does, over and over again. There's a moment in Trigon Stampede where Vash holds a dying man in his arms, man who had tried to kill him just minutes earlier. And Vash is weeping, not because he's afraid, but because he couldn't save him. Because once again, he failed to protect someone. This isn't performative. It's not virtue signaling. It's grief, because Vash doesn't just want to stop killing. He wants to believe that no one deserves to be killed, not even the ones who hurt him. This is the emotional heartbeat of Pronoia, a commitment to seeing people not as threats, but as wounded. Not as evil, but as broken in ways they haven't healed from yet. It's tempting to read this as blind idealism, but look closer. Vash doesn't trust people because he hasn't been hurt. He trusts people because he has. He knows the cost of violence. He knows what it does to the soul. Pronoia isn't innocence, it's a response to pain. There's a common misconception that believing in goodness is easy, That is the domain of the young, the unscarred, the ones who haven't been disappointed yet. But that's not what Pronoia is, Pronoia isn't denial, it's decision. Standing inside the wreckage of your belief in people and choosing to build something new anyway. Not because it's safe, but because it's necessary. Vash is not unscarred. He's traumatized, fractured, and at times, deeply exhausted. He knows what the world is capable of. He's watched it burn, but in the ashes, he still sees seeds. And that's what makes his kindness powerful. The Freudian insight, sublimation of aggression. In Freudian terms, what Vash does is a form of sublimation, the redirection of destructive impulses into something socially constructive. Where others respond to betrayal with cynicism, Vash transforms it into compassion. Where others shut down, he opens up. Not because he lacks rage, but because he chooses not to act from it. When one does not have what one wants, one must want what one has. Freud. Vash doesn't have justice, he doesn't have peace. But he has his code, he has his belief. He has the one thing No one can take from him his decision to keep loving a world that hasn't always loved him back. This is a kind of spiritual stoicism, a refusal to let pain make him cruel, even when cruelty might feel easier. Choosing to believe is its own strength. There's something quiet and tragic about Vash's solitude. For all his laughter, he's lonely. For all his charm, he's misunderstood. Because when you choose to see the good in people, you often suffer alone. You are called weak. You are called unrealistic. But what if that's the real strength? To not become like the thing that hurt you. To hold on to softness in a world that rewards hard edges. To show mercy to the ones who least deserve it, because that's how cycles break. Vash's pacifism isn't passive, it's defiant. It's loud in its quietness. He's not waiting for the world to be kind before he is. He is the kindness. He becomes the proof that it's possible. And maybe, in doing so, he invites others to do the same, to risk of staying soft. There's a scene in Trigon where someone asks Vash why he risks so much for people who don't deserve it. He pauses. It's because someone once did that for me. Okay, that's the ripple effect of Pronoia. The idea that kindness, once planted, might grow in places we'll never see. That our belief in others might outlive us. Vash doesn't believe people are harmless. He believes they're worth saving anyway, and that is a choice, not of naivety, but of faith. Vash believes in people, not just the innocent, not just the kind. He believes in the ones who've done harm. It's the ones who've crossed lines. It's the ones who, by all logic, deserve no second chance. And somehow, still looks at them with eyes that say, "You're more than what you've done." This isn't sentimentality. It isn't ignorance. It's the quiet philosophy of someone who's been there. Someone who knows what it feels like to be on the edge of destruction and still long to be seen. Someone who's learned that people do terrible things when they forget they are still human. And sometimes, remembering that is the first step back. Mercy at the cost of everything. Talk about Legato bluesomers, the embodiment of cruelty. A man who manipulates, humiliates, and forces Vash to commit the very act he's sworn never to do. Take a life. Vash kills him. It breaks him. But what's haunting isn't just the act. It's what happens after, because even in that moment of devastation, Vash doesn't rage. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't claim justice. He mourns, not just for the victim, but for Legato. Because Vash knows that someone doesn't become Legato overnight. He knows that hatred this deep is just a scar that kept festering, and still, Vash chooses mercy. Not in the literal sense. The act itself is irreversible, but emotionally, spiritually, Vash refuses to reduce Legato to a monster. He acknowledges the horror, but he refuses to let it infect him. It's the core of Vash's Pronoia. He believes in people even when it hurts. Carl Rogers, unconditional, positive regard. Carl Rogers, one of the founding figures in humanistic psychology, once proposed a radical idea. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. It's the foundation of unconditional, positive regard. The belief that people are deserving of compassion, even in their worst moments. That judgment breeds defensiveness, but empathy opens the door to transformation. This is what Vash offers. Not forgiveness without consequences. Not approval of harm, but the quiet affirmation that you are still a person, even after you've fallen. And for someone like Vash, who has seen pain at a planetary scale, that takes more courage than a gun ever could. He's not in denial. He's choosing a different ending. It's easy to mistake Vash's philosophy as denial, that he's running from reality, that he refuses to face how awful people can be. But this is where trauma-informed thinking offers a different lens. Vash isn't avoiding darkness. He's been shaped by it. He's lived through annihilation. He's carried survivor's guilt for years. He's watched the people he loved die in front of him, and still refuses to give up on the species that killed them. That's not denial. That's transformation. In trauma theory, there's something called post-traumatic growth. The idea that pain, when processed, can lead not just to healing, but to deeper empathy, purpose, and moral clarity. Vash doesn't erase his pain. He metabolizes it, and what comes out isn't bitterness. It's a philosophy rooted in love, not the fragile kind that breaks when tested, but the kind that endures because it has been. He's not blind to evil. He just refuses to mirror it. One of the most devastating truths of Trigon is how often Vash is misunderstood. People think he's unserious, soft, weak. They mock his pacifism. Prove him, try to prove him wrong, and sometimes he breaks. But the tragedy isn't just that people don't believe in Vash. It's that they don't understand the cost of being him. Every act of mercy is an act of grief. Every spared life is another wound, because Vash knows that kindness doesn't always win, that some people will betray it, mock it, exploit it, and he shows up anyway, because the point isn't winning. It's not becoming what broke you. A philosophy of the brokenhearted. There's a kind of person who holds out hope, not because it's rewarding, but because they remember what it felt like to be shattered and unloved, and they would do anything to make sure no one else feels that way. Vash is that kind of person. He doesn't expect people to deserve his faith. He offers it anyway, not because they're good, but because they're trying, or because he hopes they still can. It's the inverse of judgment. Where most ask, do they deserve my trust? Vash asks, what might they become if someone did? That is radical. And in a world where trauma often breeds detachment, it's almost sacred. Trauma, memory, and the inner child. If you look closely, Vash is someone deeply in touch with his younger self. His moral code isn't just intellectual, it's emotional. It's rooted in remembrance. The boy he once was, the world he once hoped for. The dream that maybe, somewhere, people wouldn't always choose cruelty, and that memory becomes his anchor. In trauma work, inner child healing is about reconnecting to the parts of us that were once open before the pain. Vash never lets go of that part. He protects it, even when it isolates him, even when it hurts. Because for Vash, that part isn't weakness. It's where his truth lives. It's the price of believing anyway. Believing in people comes with a cost. Vash loses friendships. He's blamed for tragedies he didn't cause. He carries pain that no one sees, all because he refuses to give up on the idea that humans are worth saving. But he doesn't need others to agree, because belief for Vash isn't contingent on validation. It's a promise he made to himself, a promise that says, I know what it's like to be lost. I won't be the one to push someone further. Even if they push him first, it's the kindness that comes from pain. He believes in people, not because they deserve it, but because he remembers what it felt like to be broken and still want to be saved. That's the kind of Pronoia Vash lives. Not a fantasy, not a delusion, but a grief-forged choice. He's not kind because he hasn't been hurt, okay? He's kind because he has. And he knows what it means to carry pain with no one to understand it. And so, he understands, over and over again. Even when it breaks him, especially when it breaks him. Because someone once believed in him. And that was enough to change everything. There's this idea we're taught that hope is soft, but optimism is naive. Stop believing in people means you haven't suffered enough to know better. But in Vash's world, where loss is constant and cruelty is routine, and the ones who try to be good are the first to bleed, believing isn't weakness, it's rebellion. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. The how for Vash has been unbearable. Centuries of wandering, entire towns wiped out because of his existence. Friends lost, A brother who wants to destroy the very species Vash is trying to save. And yet Vash stays. He suffers. He mourns. He breaks. But he never gives up the one thing knives can't take from him. His why. That belief that there is still something in humanity worth saving. That even if there's no justice, no reward, no grand redemption, hope itself is a kind of meaning. Not because the world makes it easy, but because it refuses to. Hope as resistance. It's important to understand. Vash doesn't expect the world to change. He isn't holding out for some magical utopia. He knows how ugly it gets, how unrelenting, how few people are willing to try when survival is on the line. But that's what makes his choice powerful. He's not hoping because it's easy. He's hoping because it's the one thing this world hasn't beaten out of him. Every time he lowers his weapon, every time he shows mercy, every time he smiles through grief, he is resisting. And resistance in a broken world is not apathy. It's active, it's deliberate, defiant. This isn't toxic positivity. It's trauma-informed faith. There's a kind of optimism that's shallow. It pretends things are fine. It denies the darkness, says, just stay positive while ignoring the wreckage. Vash doesn't do that. He doesn't pretend not to feel pain. He doesn't ignore grief. He doesn't act like everything's okay. He weeps. He trembles. He crumbles under the weight of what he carries. But he chooses to see light anyway. This is what trauma-informed hope looks like. It doesn't bypass pain. It walks through it again and again and still comes back with gentleness. That kind of hope isn't delusion. It's discipline. Viktor Frankl, choosing meaning in suffering. Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist Viktor Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Vash can't undo what he's lost. He can't change who Knives became. He can't protect everyone he meets, but he can decide who he becomes in the face of that truth. He doesn't wait for meaning to be handed to him. He makes it moment by moment. Mercy becomes his mission. Hope becomes his rebellion. His refusal to kill isn't just morality. It's his entire identity, the boundary he draws between who he could become and who he chooses to be. That's Pronoian as fantasy, but as agency. Philosophical Pronoia, betting on the better end. The original idea of Pronoia counterpart, Count to Paranoia, suggests a worldview where, instead of assuming the universe is conspiring against you, you believe it's conspiring for you. Not blindly, not irrationally, spiritually, existentially. It's the belief that the cosmos tends toward connection, repair, healing, but only if we choose to participate. Vash lives like someone who thinks the world wants to be better. It's just waiting for people to meet it halfway. His mercy isn't based on logic. It's based on imagination. He imagines who people could be if they were forgiven. He imagines a version of the world where pain doesn't have the final word. And he doesn't just dream it, okay? Behaves as if it's already true. That's Pronoia, weaponized as compassion against the logic of his world. Because, let's be honest, the world of Trigon runs on a different logic. Shoot first, survive at all costs. Don't trust too much. Don't feel too much. Don't hope too long. Kindness gets you killed. Belief gets you hurt. And yet Vash chooses both, over and over and over. It becomes a glitch in the system. A reminder that there is no law in this universe so total that it can't be interrupted by grace. Even when it's irrational, especially when it is. What they call naive is actually brave. You hear it often. People call Vash naive. They mock the way he smiles. They scoff when he spares enemies. They call his beliefs childish. They don't understand the cost of living like this. Vash isn't naive. He's tired. He knows how much easier it would be to give in, to stop caring, to become cold, calculating, efficient. He's tempted, constantly. And still, he chooses softness. In a world that taught him to shoot first, Vash learned how to wait, how to forgive, how to hope. Belief as a daily practice. What makes Vash powerful isn't his aim, it's not his speed or skill. It's the way he gets up every day and remembers what he values. Not because it's useful, not because it works, but because it's who he wants to be. In a sense, Vash is engaged in a lifelong act of spiritual resistance. He's trying to be proof that you can lose everything and still stay soft, that you can be broken and still choose love, okay? That you can carry grief and still be someone's light, okay? That belief is an act of becoming, not just a feeling, okay? The why that keeps you going. It's not victory. It's not even peace. It's something quieter, something older, a small promise he made a long time ago that he wouldn't become the thing that broke him, that he would live in such a way that others might feel seen, might feel spared, might feel loved. And that's what makes him terrifying to a world addicted to fear, because belief is the one thing you can't kill, especially when it's chosen by someone who has every reason not to. People like to say that hope is beautiful, but they don't often talk about how much it hurts, because to hope truly, deeply, relentlessly is to open yourself to the possibility of disappointment, to look at a world that has already broken your heart and still keep it open. One of the most devastating moments in Trigon isn't a battle. It's not a gunshot. It's not an explosion. It's Vash on his knees, crying. Wolfwood is dead, and the weight of it is unbearable. It's not just because Vash loved him, but because Wolfwood represented the complexity of the world Vash is trying to navigate. It's a man who wanted to believe, who tried to do right, but couldn't always afford to be gentle. Vash sees himself in that contradiction. And when Wolfwood dies, Vash isn't just mourning a friend. He's mourning the part of himself that wonders, is it possible to live this way and survive? Because hope for Vash isn't abstract, it's personal, it's lived. And when it doesn't work, it hurts like hell. People assume that if you believe in goodness, you must be naturally positive, as if it's easier for you, as if faith comes without cost. But the truth is, believing in others is exhausting. To see people's potential while watching them squander it. To extend grace only to be met with betrayal. To keep caring even when no one else does. That isn't weakness. It's grief on a loop. It's compassion with no off switch. Psychologists call it hyper-empathy. When you feel other people's pain so vividly, it becomes your own. It's common in those with early trauma, especially those who weren't protected growing up. It's people who learned that the only way to feel safe was to monitor everyone else's emotions, to anticipate needs, avoid conflict, absorb discomfort. Vash embodies this. He walks through life like a tuning fork, picking up every frequency of suffering, every vibration of loss. He notices the trembling hands, the hesitation in someone's voice, the violence people carry just beneath the surface. And he doesn't just see it, he feels it. It's why he can't look away. It's why he steps in again and again a vein when it costs him everything. But there's a shadow side to this kind of empathy. Because when you care this much, every injustice feels personal. Every failure cuts deeper. And every loss threatens to undo the thread you're holding yourself together with. Here's where people misunderstand Vash's worldview. They assume Pronoia means always seeing the good, always smiling, always hopeful. But that's not what Vash does. He's not blind to cruelty. He's burdened by it. He weeps. He falters. He screams silently at a universe that refuses to change. Pronoia doesn't mean pretending it's all okay. It means choosing to believe healing is still possible even when it isn't immediate. Even when the world gives you every reason not to believe anymore. It's an act of imagination, of resistance, of spiritual endurance. Vash doesn't break because he stops believing. He breaks because he believes so much. Every time he fails to save someone, it's not just a tactical mistake, it's a moral injury, because in his heart, he's made a promise. I will not become like the world that hurt me. And when he loses someone like Wolfwood or Rem or any of the countless innocents caught in the crossfire. It's not just grief, it's doubt. Doubt that kindness is enough. Doubt that mercy can survive. Doubt that this philosophy he's built his entire identity on can actually endure in a place so broken. And still, he keeps going. Vash's kindness isn't instinctual. It's chosen, hard-earned, and painfully maintained. Every time he chooses to spare someone, he is not doing it because he feels safe. He's doing it because he remembers what it was like to be unsaved, how much it would have meant if someone had chosen compassion. This is what makes him different from the villains in Trigon. They respond to cruelty with more cruelty. They return violence with violence. They believe the world is hopeless, so why bother? But Vash knows better. He knows that belief without action is fantasy. So he acts, even when it breaks him, even when no one sees it, even when it doesn't work, because he's not kind for reward. He's kind because it's the only way he knows how to stay himself. One of the most honest things Trigon teaches is that hope and grief are not opposites. They are coexisting truths. You grieve because you hoped, because you loved, because you believed things could be different, and when they're not, to ache. But that ache is sacred. It means you haven't given up on goodness. It means your heart still beats in alignment with something more human than revenge, more fragile than power, more necessary than control. Vash's wounds aren't always visible. They're not in his body. They're in his silence, his tired eyes, the way he hesitates before smiling. It's the cracks that show when no one is watching. He doesn't complain. He doesn't blame. He simply carries it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Because being the person who always forgives, who always protects, who always sees the best costs something. It costs the right to rage, the right to collapse, the right to say, this isn't fair. But Vash makes peace with that cost. Because he's seen what happens when people stop believing. And he refuses to be part of that cycle. He hurts because he hopes. He bleeds because he believes. But he doesn't stop. Not because he's unbreakable, but because he knows someone has to keep believing. Even if the world doesn't change. Even if it keeps hurting him. Even if mercy isn't enough. Because that belief, held quietly, gently, desperately, might be the only thing left worth saving. You'd be forgiven for thinking Vash is a fool, for laughing at his optimism, rolling your eyes at his pacifism, wondering how someone could live through what he has and still smile. But the truth is Vash is not naive. He is free. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Albert Camus, that is Vash, a rebellion made flesh. Not through fire or vengeance, but through mercy. In a world of bloodshed, he chooses tenderness. In a world of scars, he chooses hope. And in a world where cruelty is expected, he chooses to remain kind. Not because he doesn't know better, but because he does. There's a moment in Trigon where Vash is asked, how can you still smile after everything? And for once, he doesn't answer with a joke. Because that smile, that exaggerated grin, that clumsy warmth, it's not a mask to hide behind. It's a message. It says, I've been broken, and I still choose to care. I've been hurt, and I still choose to protect. I've seen the worst of humanity, and I still believe in it. This isn't performative. It's not delusion. It's resistance. Most characters in Trigon are products of their pain. They lose someone and become hardened. They're betrayed, and they shut down. They're hurt, and so they hurt others. It's the logic of trauma. Turn the wound into a weapon. But Vash breaks that logic. His pain doesn't become punishment. It becomes purpose. Where others seek to control, he seeks to understand. Where others use their past to justify their rage, he uses it to justify mercy. because he knows what it's like to be seen only for your worst moment, to be defined by the damage you didn't ask for, to want another chance, then be denied. So he offers that chance to everyone else, even when they don't deserve it, even when it costs him, because cruelty is not a requirement. It's just what we've been taught. Pronoia isn't a belief that the universe is always kind. It's the belief that kindness is still worth practicing, even when the universe isn't. It's the decision to believe not because life has proven itself trustworthy, but because you've decided to be trustworthy anyway. That's what Vash embodies, not faith in fate, not blind optimism, but active, deliberate hope. He knows the world is broken. He's lived its fractures. He's bled in its ruins. Still, he says, there's something worth saving here that isn't delusion. It's courage. There's a quiet beauty to the way Vash lives. He's not waiting for someone to hand him a reason. He's not demanding proof that it will all work out. He simply chooses to be gentle, to forgive, to help, not because he's certain it will fix everything, but because he knows who he wants to be then when the world doesn't change. Maybe Vash didn't believe the world was good. Maybe he just believed we could choose to be, and maybe that's enough. Let's be honest, it's hard to believe in people these days. The news, the cruelty, the way kindness is treated like a weakness. You get tired, you get jaded, start to feel like caring this much is it's foolish. But if there's anything Vash teaches us, it's this. You are not naive for still believing in kindness. You are not weak for wanting to see the good. In fact, that might be the most radical thing about you. Kia doesn't mean closing your eyes to the dark. It means opening them wider and still choosing to look for the light. It means seeing every reason to give up, every excuse to stop caring, and saying, no, I will not let the world harden me. That is not softness, that is strength. The kind that isn't loud or violent or flashy. The kind that simply says, I remember what it felt like to hurt, so I won't add to the hurting. You're allowed to keep hoping even when it feels like no one else does. You're allowed to forgive yourself even when you're still healing. You're allowed to love people even when they're imperfect. And you're allowed to show up not because you're sure, but because you still care. Vash isn't who he is because the world was kind to him. He's who he is because he chose to make it kinder one person, one mercy, one belief at a time. You can do that too. The world may not always be kind, but you still can be. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the healing begins. If something in this story resonated with you, a line, a moment, a part of yourself you saw in Vash, we'd love to hear it. Leave a comment, write the words down. Let this be part of your journey, too. And if there's a character you think sees the good the way Vash does, let us know. You're not just watching these videos, you're helping shape them. We're glad you're here.